Biometric technology is in the news. How do we ensure its successful deployment? Here to answer that question is Pauline Norstrom, CEO of Anekanta Consulting. Pauline.
Well, first and foremost, a number of preliminary steps really must be taken before this technology is used. And just to be clear, which biometric technology is in the news. It's remote biometric identification, which is otherwise known as live facial recognition. And that is so contentious because the individual doesn't necessarily have to be aware that their biometric data, which is their face map, effectively, is being captured. Whereas with other biometric technology like fingerprints, you have to actually physically make contact with the reader device. So for good reason, there's great contention around this subject and discussion. And also, clearly, the industry is attempting to guide and provide information about what should be done prior to a deployment. Now, the most contentious deployment is in a public space, but in fact, any remote biometric technology should really be subject to a number of considerations, which include determining why it's needed, where it's going to be used, and also, what problem is it actually solving, and can some other technology perform this function? And this assessment needs to be done alongside an ethical assessment, which considers the impact on the privacy of the individual who might knowingly or unknowingly interact with the system. Now, currently, there's actually no legislation that guides this properly. There's GDPR, which tells you everything but defines nothing. It is a good piece of underlying legislation. It defines what should be done with biometric data, which is special category data, but it doesn't actually go any further than that in terms of helping this assessment process. There is a need for a data protection impact assessment, which is also defined in GDPR and enforced by the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK. But fundamentally, without all of these things, the deployer, who might be the actual owner of a building, it might be a public space operator, they need to really think twice whether they go ahead with that deployment if they can't satisfy these really quite straightforward criteria, which examine, is this going to harm anyone, invade the privacy of anyone, is it ethical, does it comply with the law, being the GDPR, and also is it proportionate, and could there be some other technology performing this purpose? And only if those are satisfied, go ahead and do it. And still actually make sure there are checks and measures, there's proper accountability, that responsibility is given to individuals. And for instance, if somebody wants to know, have I been captured on the system, that the data is available to give to an individual if they undertook a subject access request to determine what data was held. All of these things have to happen. And currently, you will not find any legislation that defines this clearly. There are organisations that are taking steps to do this in the absence, in this void. And the BSIA is one of those organisations that created the very first guide to the use of facial recognition, both for identification, so live facial recognition, sort of essentially pointing cameras at crowds when you don't necessarily expect the person you're looking for to be there. And also it defines verification, which includes using the face for ID to authenticate banking transactions. So really, if you do all of that, then you're more likely to undertake a safe deployment. But there are still grey areas there, and the legislation that underpins this isn't strong enough, in my opinion.
And moving sort of past the regulation, I'm certainly inclined to agree with you. There's a definite requirement now to put something in place. But let's talk about some of the practical issues that we're facing. As a society, we're arguably more concerned now than ever, more than ever, with the question of females feeling safe in the community and as they walk on the streets. What about AI? Is it ethical to be using AI to ensure women's safety in the UK?
within the right, and appropriate ethical frameworks, yes. And my view on this is we need more technology to help protect women, because it feels, that very little has changed in terms of not just the perception of safety, but the actual safety of women. And that's, runs across the generations. There are females, friends, family who actually ring each other to say, I'm walking around an area, don't feel particularly safe, I'm ringing you, can you stay on the phone? And that is commonplace. And I think although the government is attempting to target some of the institutional attitudes towards what I describe as a downgrade of the level of risk women are presented with every day, there's some legislation, reviews, but the underlying issue, in my view, is that there needs to be a proper definition of the terrorism of women, and that's not currently guided clearly enough, in my opinion. A lot more could be done to make it easier for the police to actually determine it. So if you describe it, you can call it out and you can change it. I don't think that's clear enough now. And in the meantime, I think what needs to happen alongside this is that AI can better inform women. So in terms of, potentially think of the non-tech measures that could be put in place in a city. There could be better public information that enables anyone, actually, not just females, to make a determination whether it's safer to go this way or this way. And that just could be signage, around the city. But how AI could lend itself to this purpose. Let's say all the cameras were mapped and those were then overlaid on a map, and you had your GPS location. So wherever you walk, if there are surveillance cameras there. And generally, if there's surveillance cameras, the crime rates are lower. There is a correlation between those things. So you could argue it is inherently safer where areas of a city are surveyed. So AI could lend itself well to this purpose. So not only that, combining location data, the cameras, and also some means of communicating to rapidly avert a situation. Those are ways in which AI is actually already being used. If you look at what some of the big tech firms are doing by way of providing situational awareness, Google has been doing this for quite a long time now, in that wherever you are, if you subscribe, you have your location switched on, Google will offer up to you aggregated data, which will tell you whether places are busy, will tell you about the traffic, and it will tell you about where the nearest restaurant is. So, it's not a massive technology leap for someone to actually create a piece of technology that's designed for street safety, providing relevant information about crime stats. Don't walk into this area. You're actually going to a zone where there's a lot of crime. It's very dark down there. There's no cameras down there. No one will hear you, and these are areas that could be rapidly put into place. And actually, think of this concept progressing further, we're kind of moving into a kind of almost geofencing, but a smart city type of concept where there's public information available, and also potentially, emergency response type displays. If you have public information displays that will give you relevant information based on your location, those could also be used in a way that could divert people away from an area if it's not safe. And that's not just for women, that is anyone in a particularly dangerous area. But the fact that women's safety takes such a low place on the government's agenda, I think it's about time something was done differently in terms of, legislation will evolve. There will be changes gradually to attitudes, but societal attitudes, that's a big ship to turn around. And in the meantime, technology could be working every single day for every woman that, wishes to use it, to help them not just feel safer, but actually be safer based on facts, based on information, based on evidence. So they can make the choices about risk, as opposed to a lottery, which it can be, by going out just, it's dark at 4 o'clock in the UK in winter. So that doesn't feel safe for a woman to be walking around, and it's actually technically still during the day. So, you know, there's technology available, and it can and should be used for this purpose.
It feels like you're saying that there's a blend here of things that need to happen to genuinely change the position and make our British women feel safe walking on the streets of their own country. Pauline, thank you. Most insightful as always. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your position and your opinion with the audience at Security on Screen. It'd be good to speak with you again. Take care.
Thank you.